In a moment no one could have anticipated, Hollywood legend Sylvester Stallone was brought to tears by a mysterious letter from Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré. The words inscribed within left everyone, fans, media, and even his team, entirely speechless. This heartfelt exchange is more than just celebrity news. It's a profound reminder of humility, humanity, and the unexpected threads of respect that connect us across the world. It started like any other morning in Los Angeles. Sylvester Stallone was in his home office, flipping through fan mail with his assistant, Michael. Most letters were predictable: requests for autographs, heartfelt messages, old posters of Rocky or Rambo. But one envelope stood out. It was brown, slightly wrinkled, with no logo, no return address, just a single name written on the front: to Mr. Sylvester Stallone, urgent. Michael almost tossed it aside, thinking it might be a prank, but something made Sly pause. "Wait," he said, "give me that one." He opened it slowly, carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. The ink was neat, elegant, unexpected. At the bottom of the letter was a signature in bold: Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition Burkina Faso. Stallone stared. Burkina Faso? He hadn't heard that name in a long time. He looked at the words again. His eyes blinked hard. Then, without saying a word, he began to cry. Michael sat in stunned silence. "Sly, what is it?" he asked. But Sylvester didn't answer immediately. He was still gripping the letter, as if it might float away if he let go. Finally, in a quiet voice, he began to read. "Dear Sylvester, I am not writing to you as a politician. I am writing as a son, a boy who sat in a broken classroom in the heat of Burkina Faso, watching a grainy black and white TV. That was the first time I saw you. You were running through the streets, fighting, falling, getting back up. I didn't know English, but I understood everything. You taught me how not to give up. You made me believe I could fight back against hunger, against war, against fear. You gave me the strength to stand. And today I am standing because once upon a time Rocky did too." Sylvester stopped reading. Tears dripped onto the letter. He covered his face. "I don't even know this man," he whispered, "but somehow he knows me." Michael grabbed his phone. "We have to find out if this is real," he said. But Sylvester stopped him. "No, not yet." The letter wasn't finished. He turned to the last few lines. "There are children here who need heroes. Not the ones on screen, but the ones who reach across oceans. If you ever find it in your heart, visit us. Even for a moment, let them see what I once saw. With deep respect, Ibrahim Traoré." Michael looked at Sly. "Are you going to reply?" Sylvester shook his head. "No reply." Michael raised an eyebrow. "I'm going to go." That evening, he contacted his team and requested a private flight. "No press, no media," he said. "Where to?" the assistant asked. Stallone stared at the letter in his hand and said, "Burkina Faso." When the wheels of the plane touched down in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, Sylvester Stallone looked out the window in silence. No press, no red carpet, just heat, dust, and children waving from behind the airport fences. The man who once played Rocky was now walking into something far deeper than any movie set. A quiet escort led him from the private jet. No sirens, just two black SUVs and a single flag of Burkina Faso taped to the windshield. An official greeted him gently. "President Traoré is not here yet, but he asked us to take you somewhere first." "Where?" Stallone asked, confused. The man smiled. "To the place where your story began." They drove through narrow roads, passing market stalls, dusty playgrounds, and worn-out buildings. Then they arrived. A small school made of clay and tin with cracked windows and faded paint. The sign read, "École de l'Espoir, School of Hope." The guide whispered, "This was where the president watched Rocky over 20 years ago." Sylvester stood frozen. He hadn't even met Traoré yet, but his heart was already breaking. The school was nearly empty, just a few teachers cleaning and children playing in the distance. The guide led Stallone through a narrow hallway, its walls covered in chalk drawings and peeling posters. They reached a small room with no door. Inside it smelled of dust and memory. A rusty metal projector sat in the center. "Right here," the guide said softly, This is where they played the film. Stallone stepped in. There was no luxury, no screen, just a white sheet still hanging on the wall. He imagined a young Ibrahim Traoré sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, eyes wide, watching Rocky Balboa rise from nothing. No popcorn, no Hollywood, just hope. Suddenly, a little boy entered, barefoot and curious. He looked at Stallone with big eyes. "Say toy Rocky?" he whispered. Stallone bent down, touched the boy's shoulder, and smiled. "No," he said gently, "but I'm here because of you." Outside, the sun burned golden through the window. Inside, the past and present were touching hands. That evening, Stallone sat quietly in the guest house provided for him. He reread the letter from President Traoré over and over. Each word sank deeper than before. Then a knock came. It was a young woman in traditional dress. She handed him a small box, smiled, and left without a word. Inside the box was a wooden bracelet, hand-carved, simple, and a second letter. "Mr. Stallone, you don't owe us anything, but you've already given so much. Tomorrow, if your heart allows, I would be honored to meet you, not as a fan but as a friend. Ibrahim." Sylvester held the bracelet in his palm for a long time. This wasn't just about a movie anymore. It was about lives, about gratitude, about the power of stories told to people who had nothing but dreams. He looked up at the ceiling and whispered to himself, "This is the most important role I've ever played, and there's no script for it." The morning air in Ouagadougou was still, as if the whole city was holding its breath. At the presidential residence, there were no reporters, no cameras, no media frenzy, just a table under a tree and 2 chairs. President Ibrahim Traoré waited, calm and smiling. When Stallone arrived, he didn't approach with celebrity pride. He walked with humble respect. They shook hands quietly. "You're not what I expected," Stallone said with a chuckle. Traoré replied warmly, "Neither are you." They sat and then silence. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that only happens when 2 people truly understand each other. "I watched Rocky when I had nothing," Traoré said. "It made me feel strong, like I could fight for something better." Stallone nodded, eyes soft. "I made that film when I had nothing too. 2 lives from different worlds touched by the same fire." Then Traoré placed a 3rd chair between them. "For someone else," he said. "For who?" Traoré answered, "For every child who ever felt like they weren't seen." After their quiet meeting, President Traoré handed Stallone a sealed brown envelope. "Read it alone," he said gently. That evening in his guest room, Stallone sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Inside were handwritten letters, some neat, some messy, some with drawings in the corners. They were from orphans, schoolchildren, and street boys who had once felt forgotten. One said, "Dear Rocky, I run like you in the mornings before school because it makes me feel alive." Another read, "You punched the bad man. I want to punch hunger. Thank you." A third said, "President Traoré said you are his brother. That means you are our uncle." Tears slid down Stallone's face before he realized. These weren't fan letters. They were thank yous from kids who had been given hope by a movie and a president who never forgot them. One paper had just a single line, barely readable, "When I'm scared, I remember Rocky got up." Stallone folded it, placed it in his shirt pocket, and whispered, "I'm not the hero here. These kids are." The next day, Stallone asked to visit the children in person. Traoré said nothing, just nodded. They drove to a modest compound on the edge of the city, not glamorous but full of life. Children ran barefoot in the dirt, shouting, laughing, singing. The moment Stallone stepped out of the car, they surrounded him, but they didn't scream Rocky or ask for autographs. They hugged him. One girl reached for his hand and placed a small, broken toy in his palm. "For you," she smiled shyly. He held it like a treasure. Another boy climbed onto his back, giggling. Traoré walked behind, watching with pride in his eyes. "They don't see a celebrity," he said. "They see someone who never gave up." In that moment, surrounded by laughter and broken sandals, Stallone realized this wasn't about him. It was about every child who believed the world could change, even if just a little, because of kindness, courage, and a story. As he left, one child ran up and whispered something into his ear. Whatever it was, it made him cry again, but this time they were tears of hope. Back at the guest house, Sylvester Stallone couldn't sleep. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the faces of those children, their joy, their pain, their innocence. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his assistant in Los Angeles. "The press is asking where you are. TMZ says you're off filming. Should we correct it?" Stallone didn't respond. Instead, he opened his notebook and began to write. Not a script, not a quote, just a letter to himself. He wrote of his guilt, how many years he'd spent in luxury, blind to what real survival looked like. He wrote about Ibrahim Traoré's humility and how one man had done more for his people with less than Hollywood ever had with billions. He wrote, "I came here thinking I was famous, but now I'm just learning what it means to be human." When he finished, he folded the note and placed it on the nightstand. Then, quietly, he knelt beside the bed and prayed, not for himself, not for his career, but for the children who still ran in the dust with broken shoes and unbroken dreams. The next morning, President Traoré invited Stallone to a quiet gathering under a large baobab tree. Only a few people were present. Some teachers, a nurse, and 4 orphans who had recently been taken into a new care program. No microphones, no journalists, just people. Traoré stood with a small wooden box in his hands. He looked at the children, then at Stallone. "This man gave me courage when I was a boy. Today I want to give something back, not just to him but to every child in Burkina Faso." He opened the box. Inside were blueprints, drawings for a film and storytelling academy to be built near the same school where he first saw Rocky. Stallone's mouth fell open. "It won't be fancy," Traoré said, smiling, "but it will be ours. A place where our children can tell their stories and believe they matter." One of the girls clapped her hands in excitement. Stallone stood up slowly, visibly emotional. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "Say nothing," Traoré replied, "but promise you'll help us build it." Stallone placed a hand on his chest. "With everything I've got." And in that moment, a new chapter in both their lives quietly began. Later that afternoon, Traoré took Stallone on a final, unannounced visit. They drove to a building Stallone hadn't noticed before, simple but freshly painted. The sign outside read, "Maison de Résilience, House of Resilience." It was a trauma center. Inside, soft music played, and the walls were painted with colorful images of animals, warriors, and smiling children. "This is where we help children who've lost their families to war, sickness, or poverty," Traoré explained softly. A nurse walked them into a room where 10 children sat in a circle, sharing stories. A boy, no older than 7, spoke quietly, "When my village was attacked, I ran and hid for 2 days. I thought I would die." Another child held his hand and whispered, "But you didn't. You're a fighter like Rocky." Stallone's throat tightened. He looked at the nurse, who nodded. "They know who you are." Traoré looked at him with gentle pride. "Your story reached places even you never imagined." One child ran up, holding a crayon drawing of Stallone with boxing gloves and wings. "I drew you as a protector," the girl said. He fell to one knee, eyes wet, and hugged her tightly. "I think you're the real protector," he whispered. Back in the capital city, Traoré and Stallone sat down for a quiet live interview with Burkina Faso's national television. It wasn't meant to be dramatic, it was meant to be a message. The host smiled as the 2 men sat relaxed side by side. She asked, "What brought you here, Mr. Stallone?" Stallone took a deep breath and said, "A letter and something bigger than fame." Then, on live television, he pulled out one of the children's drawings, the one with boxing gloves and angel wings, and held it up. "I came to visit a president, but I found a family." He paused, his lips trembling slightly. "I've been in movies for over 40 years. I've won awards, I've seen crowds scream my name, but I've never felt this kind of love." His voice broke. He wiped his eyes, unable to continue. President Traoré gently placed a hand on his shoulder, saying, "It's because here we don't love people for being stars. We love them for their hearts." And across the country, and later across the world, millions of people watched the Hollywood legend cry, not out of pain but out of overwhelming human connection. That night, Traoré did something unexpected. He invited Stallone to his home, not the presidential villa but his childhood home, still standing in the dusty backstreets of Ouagadougou. No guards, no press, just two men sitting on wooden stools outside a small house under the stars. My mother used to sit here and pray for rain, Traoré said softly. Stallone looked around. You grew up here? Traoré nodded. We didn't have much, but we had courage. That was enough. They ate simple rice and grilled chicken with laughter between bites. People think presidents and actors live different lives, Traoré said. But I think we're all just boys trying to protect what we love. Stallone looked up at the stars. You know what this feels like? What? A scene from a movie I never got to make. Traoré smiled. Maybe now you will. And in that silent moment, no red carpets, no golden statues, just two souls talking about pain, love, struggle, and hope. The world suddenly felt smaller, safer, and maybe, just maybe, stronger. On the last morning of Stallone's visit before his flight, Traoré handed him a small box. Open it when you're back in America, he said. Stallone boarded the plane, his heart full, his soul stirred. 12 hours later, in his Los Angeles home, he sat on his couch and opened the box. Inside was a folded Burkina Faso flag stitched with children's signatures and a note. You came as a stranger. You left as family. You will always have a home in Burkina Faso. There was also a golden pin, carved with a lion and a rising sun. Stallone recognized the symbol. It was used only for national heroes. His hands trembled. He wasn't expecting that, not from a president, not from a country he barely knew. He walked outside looking at the stars, so different from Ouagadougou yet suddenly familiar. And as tears rolled down his face, he whispered to himself, "This is the most important role I've ever played, being human." He didn't need applause. He had found something far greater. He had found belonging. 2 hours into his flight back to the U.S., Stallone sat quietly staring at the window. He clutched the note Traoré had left in the gift box, but something in his heart felt unsettled. It wasn't guilt, it was unfinished purpose. He rang for the flight attendant. "Can this plane return to Burkina Faso?" he asked quietly. The captain was stunned, but Stallone insisted. "I left too quickly. I need one more day, just one." After a brief conversation with authorities, the jet rerouted. When Traoré got the call, he was outside, speaking with local farmers about a water project. He smiled gently. "I knew he'd come back." The moment the plane landed, Stallone stepped off, still in travel clothes. No cameras, no plan, just conviction. "I want to help build that storytelling academy, not just in name," he said. "I'll bring in filmmakers, teachers, equipment, real investment." Traoré put a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You didn't just return to Burkina Faso. You returned to yourself." And for the first time in years, Stallone felt fully alive. The next day, the president arranged a small ceremony, not for media, but for the children. But news had spread and somehow the world tuned in. People live-streamed from rooftops. Journalists watched from afar. Social media buzzed like thunder. Sylvester Stallone stood on a wooden stage surrounded by barefoot children, while President Traoré introduced him. "Once he taught us to fight through a screen. Today he teaches us to believe face to face." Then Stallone stepped forward. "I've played heroes. I've trained, I've bled for movies. But I never felt the weight of real purpose until now." He held up one of the children's drawings. "I came here because of a letter, a simple letter. And in it, the president wrote one line I'll never forget. 'Mr. Stallone, we don't need your fame. We need your faith in us.'" He looked out at the kids. "And now I give it to you, all of it." Children cried. Mothers clapped. Even soldiers had tears in their eyes. And the world watched a man surrender his pride for something far greater, humanity. Back in Los Angeles, weeks later, Stallone did something that would shock even his fans. He published the full contents of Traoré's original letter online. Read, "Dear Sylvester, I was once a child in a war-torn village, scared and forgotten. One day I watched a dusty copy of Rocky. You were bruised, bloodied, but you got up. You reminded me to fight. I became a soldier, then a leader, not because I was fearless, but because I had hope. That hope came from you. Today I ask you not for charity, but for solidarity. Come meet the children who still carry that same fight. Come see that your purpose is still unfolding. The post went viral. Over 300 million views in 2 days. World leaders responded. UNICEF pledged support. African filmmakers wrote open letters of gratitude, and fans everywhere just wept. For the first time in years, the internet wasn't divided. It was united by compassion.